Sabria Hassan, and I'm the Director of Programs for the Banneker-Douglass Museum. Located in downtown Annapolis, the museum is a unit of the Governor's Office on Community Initiatives and overseen by the Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture. Today we're here to present our third annual youth conference. And although today we come to you on a virtual platform, we promise to be just as impactful and engaging as we've been in previous years. The year 2020 has proven to be a trying year for many of us. We wanted to make sure we offered young people a space to engage and feel empowered. This year's program will focus on the history of youth involvement in social justice movements all over the world. From the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee to Black Lives Matter, young people have often had the courage to do what the late, great Congressman John Lewis famously referred to as get in the way. We hope you leave today's program inspired to learn more about the various movements throughout the world and the role of young people. Throughout today's program, there'll be numerous opportunities for you to actively engage, win prizes, and of course, learn. We'd like to open the program with a special performance. This piece is called March On, and it is written and performed by Mr. Contavious Jones.
What's going on, young people? Contavious Jones here, and welcome. The song I'll be performing is called March On, and it's an original song. And it's about being socially active, being out there on the forefront and marching and standing up for issues that are important. You know, when good people do nothing, evil thrives. I'm gonna march down to my brother's house. Let him know I share his fears and I know his doubts. Though there's evil lurking, we're gonna stomp it right out. Though our views and hues may not be the same, I still consider you my brother. Hope you view me the same. March on to the rhythm of, march on to the rhythm of the light. March on to the rhythm of, march on to the rhythm of the light. I'm gonna march down to my sister's house. Let her know she is a diamond. Tell her let that soul shine out. Though there's evil lurking, we're gonna stomp it right out, yeah. Though our views and hues may not be the same, I still consider you my sister and treat you like a queen. March on to the rhythm of, march on to the rhythm of the light. March on to the rhythm of, march on to the rhythm of the light. I'm gonna march down to the big white house. Let them know that we are here and our time is now. Even though this evil near, we're gonna stomp it right out, yeah. Though our views and hues may not be the same, I still consider you my brother and treat you like a king. March on to the rhythm of, march on to the rhythm of the light. March on to the rhythm of, march on to the rhythm of the light.
Contavious, thank you for that powerful performance. Those lyrics were extremely inspiring. To learn more about Contavious and his music, you can visit his website, www.contavious.com, follow him on Instagram at Contavious, or find him on Facebook, Contavious Jones Music. This year, the Banneker-Douglass Museum debuted its exhibit, The Black Vote Mural Project. In commemoration of the 150th year anniversary of the 15th Amendment, which gave Black men the right to vote, and the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, which extended that right to women, the museum commissioned 17 artists, including 2 youth groups, to install murals that interpreted their depiction of the African Americans' right to vote. For many years, voting has been looked at as a form of social protest. Throughout history, marginalized groups have literally fought for the right to vote. In 2020, there are still loopholes in place that are used to disenfranchise certain groups. The best way for anyone to combat the barriers associated with voting is through education. To learn more about voting in the state of Maryland, please visit www.elections.maryland.gov. And remember, in the state of Maryland, you can register to vote at the age of 16, but you can't actually physically vote until you're 18. But as a young person who has not reached the legal age to vote, you can still encourage and empower your family members to engage in the process. Remember, your vote is your voice. And up next, we have a presentation on the power of social media from Mr. Rashad Staten. Mr. Staten is a Baltimore City native and an enthusiastic, seasoned youth engagement specialist. Please enjoy.
Peace and blessings, world. Peace and blessings. How are you all doing today? It's Rashad Staten, youth advocate, activist, a self-proclaimed catalyst of change, and I have the honor and the pleasure to be your facilitator on activating and using social media as a form of social activism, advocacy, and civic engagement. Let's build, y'all. Let's go. My presentation is going to be centered around me talking directly to the generation that I'm a part of and the generation that's following behind me. So it's in my efforts to pass the baton. But this message is for the millennial generation, and those are the Generation Z. I see you, I am a part of you, and we're going to work and build it and make it this world a better place, not for the future, but right now in the now, right? And most importantly, we're going to use our accessibilities, our resources, which is called internet and social media, for the betterment of ourselves and the collective in our community. Now, why is it important that I speak directly to my peers and the immediate generation under? Is because we are in a generation that differentiates and holds value unlike any other generation. See, our generation has been having the accessibility to tap into the virtual world and the physical realm, right? So we are born with an umbilical cord, but most importantly, or more significantly, we can tap into smartphone devices, accessibilities, the dark internet, the web, and all things that expand beyond it to get our voices heard, to make sure that we are seen, to make sure that our values are up standard, right? And we are changing and we're breaking generational curses, but we're also progressively moving forward social movements and public concerns that have never seen the magnitude of fight and the magnitude of collaboration like any before. So the work in itself is just saying tag along, find a friend, find a follower, become a leader, right? Become a leader by not just being a follower on social media, but using your knowledge and your insight to build capacity, to share information, and to employ resources for others to build this movement and build up this fellowship that we can all collectively do our parts. And that's how we're going to use social media as a platform of social activism. Let's go. Let's build. Now, I want to make it known that before we can even begin to talk about using a platform or accessibility tool to tell the world how we feel, what do we value, what should be shifted, what should be resolved, what should be lifted up, what should be counseled, what should be created. Before we can share with the world our insights, our opinions, our suggestions, I want to start by building social activism around self-identity. And self-identity is very important because self-identity is the first thing we lead with, right? In order to be a leader must be one comfortable with self. A leader must be inclined to know the field or the turf or the playing field in itself, the landscape that's ahead of them, so they know how to direct those that are following and those that are listening and those that are observing in the right manner for the benefit and the positive outcomes of something, rather than trying to be someone that is detrimental consciously or unconsciously to their followers and those that fellowship with them. So before we can share with the rest of the world what we want to do, what we want to change, what we want to create, which we want to counsel, which we want to destroy or become resolve or resolute in, we must be willing to tell the world exactly and being comfortable with who we are before we lend our space for others to leave a comment, to leave a like or a dislike button. Let's build up ourselves before we can build up the world. In effort to us building up ourselves before we lend ourselves to the rest of the world, I want to begin with an icebreaker activity. This is one of my favorite icebreaker activities. I've taken this activity across the country, from the bottom of the Mississippi to as north as Connecticut, with young people as young as the age of elementary school to elders that are twice my age. And I want to say that this activity has been exciting. This activity is thought-provoking, but most importantly, that this activity gets us a ground start in forcing ourselves to tell us who we are before we give space to social media and others to either pour in from us or withdraw from us, right? Take a sense of accountability and confidence in ourselves before we allow any other person to give us likes or dislikes, give us favor or give us comments that may distract us. This activity and this icebreaker that I want to begin with is entitled, Who Are You? Right? Who are you? And the immediate response to that is probably the most important response that you're going to give for the rest of your life. When someone asks you, who are you? The definitive and what's become more powerful is that you shape yourself and your presence in that direct response. So who are you? It's as simple as you just replying and telling a person who you want them to believe and know who you are and what you stand for. So again, this activity is called Who Are You? Who Are You as an activity is so simple because it only have two sets of expectations. One is to continuously ask yourself, who are you? And for you to then respond in positive, affirmative words that uplifts, that pours into you and builds some sense of love, comfortability, pride, esteem. Things that are most up for grabs in today's world because we allow other people to influence who we are. So again, before we begin with this activity, I want to ask you, who are you? Let's begin the activity. Now, the instructions and the expectations of who are you is very simple. I'm going to sit back and I'm going to ask you for 10 seconds with a few deep breaths before I ask the other question, which is the same question. And that question is, you guessed it, who are you? And while I ask you this, I want you to look back into the camera, prideful, in your stance, in your posture, and tell me and tell the world, who are you? Right? So it's going to go like this. For 10 seconds, I'm going to ask you, who are you? As we begin, take a deep breath. Exhale. 3 seconds and I'm going to begin asking you the question. Who are you? 3, 2, 1. Who are you? 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 Good job, good job. Now take a deep breath. Good job. I see you, I recognize you, and I honor you for taking and participating in this activity and telling yourself before you allow anyone else to tell you who you are. By telling yourself who you are. And most importantly, pouring in and reclaiming positive words of self, because you are purposeful and you are needed in order to make this world better for now and the present and the future. You are who you are by proclaiming positive affirmations over yourself. Now that you told the world who you are, it is now for me as your facilitator to introduce myself. I am Rashad Staten. I am a proud black man, a facilitator, a dad, an innovator, a creator, a businessman, someone that's autodidactic, someone that is loving, supportive, someone that is empathetic, someone that is intelligent and articulate, someone thought-provoking, someone that is mindful, someone that is a catalyst of change. And I always lead with the icebreaker of who you are, because I think before we begin any collective community building or collaborative efforts, one must be intentional on establishing a community. And a community is a collection of individuals with their own self-identity with some sense of commonality. And we can only establish a sense of commonality when we all tell our stories. So I think it's even more importantly that we know our stories. And as we are identifying ourselves as a community, in which I am speaking to Generation Z and the millennial generations, as we tell our stories of who we are, we then to understand and get a concept of how our community is. And once we understand our community, then we can take civic engagement efforts to bring upon what we want, what we stand for, what we're willing not to sacrifice, and what we're willing to fight for. So again, let's begin with yourself first by proclaiming who you are. And now, let's tell our stories so that we can then construct a narrative that defines a place in our community, so that we then know what to stand for, what we're willing not to sacrifice, and what to fight for as Generation Z and millennials, in using social media as a form of protest and social activism. Because again, we are the first generation that has been born with an umbilical cord and the accessibility and the means to tap simultaneously into the virtual world. So no cap, no filter, no shade. Let's get in depth. Let's build social activism one-on-one. So we begin very purposeful with leading with who we are first, identifying ourselves before we allow and use accessible tools and platforms like social media to give access to followers, friends, haters, those that love us, those that are just watching us, right? We give access to them, but prior to us giving access to others, we gave ourselves permission to pour into ourselves with positivity and affirmations. And I wanted to begin with that because when we talk about a civic engagement effort or social activism, regardless of which methods or which strategies, but our strategy will be social media, right? Regardless of that strategy, civic engagement and social activism must first start with us understanding and knowing the value of words, language, and the definitives of those particular words and languages. So before we can actually lead someone, we must be comfortable with who we are as a leader, right? And how do we want to define ourselves as a leader? And what tools and which direction are we going to lead others into? So again, before we upload things into the clouds, we must speak those things within ourselves, right? Because once it's in the clouds, it cannot be erased. Once it's in our minds, it's already been installed into our bodies and our hearts. So let's talk about the physical realm as a leader. How do you want to be defined as a leader? Do you want to be someone that gains fellowships and followers because of some viral sensation that exploits other people, discourage someone's own identity? Or do you want to be a leader that builds up fellowships and go viral because of respectability, because of admiration, and because you have been insightful and enlightening to someone? This is the battle of two. This is the battle of self, right? Do we want to post things that are good, or do we want to post things that are negative? Do we want to be positive and uplifting, or do we want to be a continuous distraction of things that are following under our timelines? Do we want to tell the world how we rightfully feel at that time? Or do we want to retweet someone else's phrases, short wordings, short feelings, repost other people's memes because we have no voice for self? And that is the purpose of today's social media activism. What platform are you going to use to tell the world about self, and to tell the world about how self can always make the collective better? So, as you can see, I'm very big on language. I'm very big on wording and what it does to establish a space of self-identity and stature and purpose within your own self, but within the context of your community. And I also want to use language and word to set my mood. You're right, my mood for the rest of today's workshop and facilitation, while I have your ears, your heart, and your minds. My mood is going to be set by the language and the wording of Assata Shakur. That's right, Assata. That's right, Assata. One of our most pioneer black liberators and freedom fighters, the auntie of Tupac Shakur, and one of the greatest leaders of one of our movements and organizations of black progression, being the Black Panther Party. Assata Shakur spoke these words that we often use today in movement building. And without further ado, I would just like to recite these words as a mood of how I'm going to move around my direction and my passion of presenting social activism as a tool of protest for our generation and others behind us. So without further ado, Assata Shakur. It is our duty to win. It is our duty to fight for our freedom. We must love and support one another. We have nothing to lose but our chains. Again, it is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to win. We must love and support one another. We have nothing to lose but our chains. The words of our great sister, Assata Shakur, a liberator and a fighter, spoke of this because it is always our duty to fight for our freedom. In today's world, when we're using social media and we seeing movement building, protesters, Black Lives Matter, Me Too movement, say her name, right? Defund police. This is us fighting for our freedom, using other strategies, using other directions, using what is accessible and significant to our generation to continue to fight for movements and continue to fight for liberation and freedom that is specific to our generation. So we're just reloading, we're redacting, we're uploading and getting a new prototype of the same, fight again. But this time, instead of taking it to the streets, we also have the means to take it to the internet, right? Take it to the screen so that the revolution can be televised and it can invoke change and can invoke a thought of mind, right? A thought of understanding and empathy of others that don't live, don't understand, don't talk your tongue, but we see the humanity in each other. And that is our fight. The fight for humanity. And it is our duty to win. And remember that we have nothing to lose but our chains. And that chain cannot just be something physical of handcuffs, but the chain can also be of our mental capacity, our willingness not to look beyond our current moments, our willingness not to pour into each other positively, our movements not to support each other financially, our movements not to give a like to build someone else financially, our movements not to give a like to build someone else's self-esteem. These are movement buildings that we must do to be purposeful around freedom fighting, establishing our humanity, and how do we go about being relentless to know that we have nothing to lose but our chains. And we're releasing the chains from our bodies of our bondage, but also our mental bondages on our head that allowed us to often believe into the negativity or believe into falsehood, of self or the identity of our community and our problems, right? But now to be asset-based, optimistic, and forthright and understanding what we want. And we're going to use social media to establish that. So again, who are you? What is your story? What is the narrative that you would like to uphold? And then what is the commonality between you and your community? And once we understand that, we can set the mood for our fight for freedom, our fight for humanity, our fight for a better world, our fight to be more resolute, our fight for a better tomorrow and a better now. And we're going to take it to social media to do that. But we got to then pick what social media activism is, define what civic engagement efforts are, which tools are we going to, which platforms best fits our persona, our charismatic abilities, which platforms gives us a strength and a base to build fellowships and followers in a community. All right, now that I set the mood with the words of our powerful great sister and leader of the movement building activism, the giants in ourselves by Assata Shakur, that said it's our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to win. We have nothing to lose but our chains. So it is our duty to support and love on one another. That are powerful words that's going to set our mood. So now let's go back into the language and the definitives of social activism and what social activism encompasses and how we're going to use that to transcend social media to become a tool of activism and protest. So first, before we get into social activism, I want us to step back. That's right, step back. Before you jump on Twitter, before you jump on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Snapchat, I don't care. Even if you're in MySpace, which is almost completely obsolete right now, before you upload anything, I want us to step back from even touching social activism and let's figure out the house that it belongs in, right? Before we get into social activism, I want to introduce you all or reintroduce you all to a word that encompasses the house of social activism sitting within a room within this certain house, right? So let's say that social activism is a child and this child resides in this house and the name of this house is the family name. And the family name that's on the front door of this house is called civic engagement. We're gonna start with the house of civic engagement before we can get to the child of civic engagement, which is social activism. We're going to start with the parent or the name of this household or the owner, which is civic engagement, right? And civic engagement is defined by this. Civic engagement is defined as any individual or group activity addressing issues of public concern. Citizens acting alone or together to protect public value or make changes or differences in the community are common types of civic engagement. Again, and I want you to sit back and think about what word stands out to you when hearing this definition of civic engagement. Civic engagement or civic participation is any individual or group activity addressing issues of public concern. Citizens acting alone or together to protect public value or make changes or differences in their community are common types of civic engagement. Which word stood out to you? Thank you. Thank you. Some words that stood out to me was, one, civic engagement. Hearing it from this vantage point allowed me to understand that it can encompass a lot of things and there are different types of civic engagement, right? So it's not a one size fit all. I get where you're going. Next one, it speaks of an individual or a group activity. So civic engagement can lead with self, which is why we began with who are you? Now that we understood who we are and knew that civic engagement begins with the individual, it also talks about a group activity, which means if you're in a group, you're also at a moment a self-identified community. So it is a group addressing a public issue. So any group that is addressing an issue or a public concern are forms of civic engagement and participation. So if I participate in a group that addresses a public concern, I am civically engaged. The answer is yes. And it also talks about a citizen acting alone or together to protect public values. Okay, so a citizen can also act alone or together to not just address a public concern, but also a public value, or make a change or a difference in that community. So one individual or a sense of togetherness with one or multiple people addressing a public value or making a change or a difference in a community is also common types of civic engagement and participation. Think how broad this is, that we are all meeting right now virtually to talk about social activism, to engage civic leadership, to engage youth leadership, to engage thought-provoking strategies virtually using social media is our form and our example of real-time civic engagement. Let's stay civically engaged, y'all. And let's continue to look at these other words. So now that we finished the house of civic engagement, let's look at what lives within this house of civic engagement. Other words. So now that we finished the house of civic engagement, let's look at what lives within this house of civic engagement. And let's see if we open one door, we may be welcome to social activism. Civic engagement is a compound word, right? So there's two words, that's bam, 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 and you put them together and they make this larger understanding of another word. So the compound words, or the two words in itself of civic engagement, is obviously civic and engagement. And civic pertains to relating to a city or town, especially an administration or a municipal, right? And us as citizens, we are all, or non-citizens, we live within a town or a city or a particular municipality, which is basically some sense of identified land that has been sovereign or giving ownership to someone, right? So civic is literally relating to a city or town or a space that you're presently in. And engagement is basically saying an arrangement to meet or to be present at a specific time or place. So if I am in a city or town at a specific time or place, I'm being civically engaged. Where are you right now? Got it. What are you engaged about? That question is very simple. What are we talking about? Exactly. Ourselves. Language, setting the mood, understanding civic engagement so that we can understand social activism. It's actually us being civically engaged and civically participatory. Language is key. Once you understand language, you can finesse it and change it to fit and give credibility and validity to whatever you want to do. That's just being the power of civically engaged and understanding the power of language and words and how it sets the mood. So you, my friend, let's continuously to be civically engaged. So, now that we got our space around civic engagement and understanding what it means in totality and also breaking down each word within this compound word, it is now us to identify who we are, again, as people within this civic engagement landscape, right? And how do we begin with that? Civic engagement gave us civic engagement, the definition gave us 3 ways of how we can be included within this larger common type of effort, right? It tells us we can either be citizens, we can either be humans, right? So first, how do we want to engage through this process? Do we want to engage ourselves as citizens? Are you a documented citizen of the country, the state, the place that you're in? And if not, are you still willing to lend and identify yourself as a human? Because either lenses are going to give you a space of how to go towards social activism and how to give yourself and lend yourself towards civic engagement within your respective community. So civic engagement allows us to walk through the door as either citizens or humans. I myself consider myself both. All of us do not have the privilege and the honor to walk around with both labels, or willing or comfortable enough to walk around with both labels. But which label are we going to use to walk within this house of civic engagement and to knock on the door of social activism? So, a citizen speaks of a legally or recognized subject or national of a state or commonwealth, either native or naturalized. So are you a citizen because you're legally recognized as a subject or a national of a state or commonwealth? Are you either native or naturalized? To make it easier, are you a subject, a national, a passport holder, a native, a taxpayer, or a voter? Are you an inhabitant of a particular town or city? Right? Are you a townsman or a townswoman? If any of these check, you can consider yourself a citizen. If it doesn't, don't stress. Believe me, a lot of us aren't happy of being citizens of some proclaimed greatest country of all times, or a country that is trying to make itself great again, when some of us can never identify when it was a period of greatness to begin with. So if you're not a citizen, don't be ashamed. We're still a family, and you can still sit at the table within the Civic Engagement House, because you gain entry as a human. And you, by simply being a being within a physical body, you are a human. A human, or a human right, gives you interest. And what does human right involves? A human right is a right that is believed to be justifiably to every person. So you can walk within the Civic Engagement House and you can advocate for human rights because you are a physical being on this earth, and you have justifiable rights that belong to you like every other person. And what are those rights? Those rights are your inalienable rights. Yes, what they taught us about American government. In the U.S. Constitution, they tell us about our inalienable rights. And those inalienable rights are the pursuit of life, liberty, and justice. Do you want to have a fruitful life? Do you want to pursue happiness? Do you want to pursue establishing justice? Life, liberty, justice, and pursuit of happiness. Those are your three inalienable rights, justifiable to everyone as a human, in addition to those that even may be citizens. So you pick up and you open that door to that home and come through the threshold of civic engagement by either being a citizen, a human, and or both. So welcome, family, to the table. And now we're at the table. Let's build a community and work towards social activism. Now let's go back. We can talk about the rights of a citizen. Now, citizen rights are not labeled or considered citizen rights. They are filtered under another shady term, or a term that we've all learned through history. And these terms for citizens to have rights are categorized as what? Give you a second. You think? Okay. Citizen rights are labeled under this terminology of civil rights. Yes. So now that we understood human rights are giving us the inalienable rights to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, what are the rights categorized under a citizen? Those are your civil rights. And the civil rights is the rights of a citizen to a political, social freedom, and equality. Civil rights are the rights of citizens to political and social freedom and equality. Civil and political rights are the class of rights that protect individuals from freedom from infringement by government, social organization, and private individuals. They ensure one's entitlement to participate in the civil and the political life of the society and the state without discrimination or repression. The rights of a citizen to political and social freedom and equality without concern of infringement, repression, or discrimination. Have you been protected as a citizen by having the civil rights for you to feel as though you are human? Either way, we should all be you are human. Either way, we should all be respected in our space and our time of how we show up and who we are. So let's use the language in our favor. Let's shift the universe. Let's use our social activism to replace and to install the importance to make sure that we all have our civil rights intact and we all have our human rights intact, so that our young people and those following us can pass the baton to go a little bit, further. We will no longer have to fight for this, but it will be our living purpose and what we experience every day. The rights of us being happy, the rights to us to live fruitful, and the rights for us to claim and know what justice looks like. I don't know if y'all peeped it or not, but y'all realize I haven't even gotten to what social media platforms are or anything, that I am drilling down and I'm trying to make it very evident that the most important thing is self, your story, you constructing your narrative and knowing how to protect it, you identifying your story so that you can then identify commonalities between others outside of you, so that you can identify your community, which gives you a place of being civic, which then gives you other people to be engaged by, so that you can be civically engaged within a certain time or place, right? And then it gives us a space of understanding language so that we are able to make ourselves purposeful and substantial in any space or thing that we want to lift up. And now that we've done that, it's time for us to now speak on what social activism is before we can go towards social media activism. Because social activism existed before social media came into our lives about 10 to 20 years ago, either publicly or within the private industry. Again, let's talk about social activism before we lend ourselves to the platforms of social media activism and tools of protest. Let's build, y'all. Stay with me. It's a long journey. Social activism. What is the purpose of social activism, you may ask? Well, I'll tell you. Social activism works to promote, guide, and impede change in government or political or business policies and influence the actions of individuals and groups. Whoo, that sounds familiar. Let me read that again. Social activists work to promote, guide, or impede changes in government or business policies and influence the actions of individuals and groups. Sounds similar to civic engagement, doesn't it? Social activists build connections amongst groups and communities and disseminate information on specific issues to create awareness and influence social change. What do social activists do? What type of leader should you be when you're being a social media activist? You should build connections amongst groups and communities and disseminate information on specific issues to create awareness and influence social change. So, once you jump on social media, do you become a follower or do you define yourself as a leader? Because to be a social media activist, you need to be comfortable with being a leader rather than a follower, so that your followers have information on specific issues to create and raise awareness, influence social change. Because we're living in a movement of social progression, self-identity, purpose, restoration, equity, and justice. Do your part by defining which button you're going to click. Are you going to be a leader, or are you going to become one of many thousands of followers? But we need you to show up in one particular space as your true self, with a heart and a mind to be a leader, to guide followers in the right direction. Common methods used for activism include community building, art activism, communities of practice, conflict transformation, conflict restoration, lobbying, media activism, culture voting, hacktivism, peace activism, non-violence resistance, peace camps, petitioning, political campaigning, propaganda, guerrilla communications, fake news, protest, boycott, and demonstrations. All of which can all be encompassed under social media activism. Wow. You're telling me if I'm a social activist, my common types of social media activism can lend me to spaces of art activism, to communities of practice, which includes conflict resolution and restoration, media activism, in which I'm talking about culture vulturism and hacktivism and council culture, right? Or peace activism, where I'm lifting up non-violence resistance in peace camps and efforts. Or I can encourage other people to sign petitions. Or I can create a PAC or a political campaign, or I myself can run for office. Or we can talk about guerrilla communication and the power of propaganda. And the accessibility of what we know as the fake news. Or we can still continue throughout social media platforms, raise the awareness and the consciousness of protest, boycott, and demonstration. So you, now, as a social leader, as a social activist, and now lending your space to social media activism, which method are you willing to pick up? In which platform are you willing to show your social media activism skills and insight? Let's go. So, we got social media activism together. Now let's try to find and dig deep around what social media activism is and how to define it. So I did some research. I asked Siri, I asked Alexa, I asked Google, and I even tripped around Wikipedia, right? And what I found the most compelling about social media activism is this true fact, that it is so new and so fresh and so significant and timely to our generation that guess what? It really has no definitive right now. It is the definitive is still being created by everyday life experiences that are happening in our world and our society. Again, I want to stress this, that there's really no definitive of social media activism. It is so new and so specific to our generation that it is still being defined and studied as a concrete science or field itself. But what I did gain from social media activism and me doing research is that one former President Barack Obama called out those who use social media as a way to shame others as a way of possibly ineffective activism, which was surprising because it was the social media grassroots efforts that helped propel President Obama into the White House, right, to be the first African-American elected official in presidency. That he used these grassroots efforts to get dollars of every American citizen from lower monetary donations rather than big corporate billion-dollar donations through social media engagement and outreach efforts, but he had some skepticism of social media activism. However, he did acknowledge that this is an accelerated platform and outlet that typically engages young people. Again, he does acknowledge the fact that this social media or this form of activism through social media is very significant and very timely to our generation as young people. He has also distinguished that, however, social media has become a popular way to support or spread the messaging, the opinions can often be ineffective or unclear. And that is because this platform is so accessible that we get it fluctuated. We get bombarded with other people's opinions that sometimes our message become unclear. So if we're reposting one day feeling this way, we're posting the other day feeling that way, and we start to conflict our own messaging, our own branding, or our own stance on a decision, who you are as a leader becomes uncertain to those that are following behind you. So what is your true stance? What are you unwilling to sacrifice? What are you unwilling to sacrifice? What are you willing to fight for? What are you willing to stand up and lift up? What are you willing to remain clear on? What are you willing to find commonalities of others and retweet and repost and share and like and cross-share information to raise awareness and consciousness and impact change is what makes social media effective. Standing on your ones and your twos, right? Standing on your ones and your twos, right? You being willing to be your true self makes social media effective. 64% of Americans believe that social media platforms help give voice to those that are often unrepresented. So those that are often left out away from the tables or a part of conversations. Can you download an app to get your voice out? Can you make your voice heard by sharing your content? Could you create a meme? Could you create a short phrase? Could you create a hashtag? Could you create a hashtag? Could you create a petition? Could you show a video, a live video, or recording of something that makes other people awaken, raise their consciousness, or make them want to join you in your fight for freedom, liberation, or social progression? What are you going to do? Because 64% of Americans know and value that social media platforms give voice to the unrepresented. We are not the minority anymore. We are the majority, so our voices need to be heard at majority of the conversations that are going to directly impact us. Your voice is important. You matter. Your voice matters. Make sure to use the platforms and the tools to make your voice heard to those that need it to be heard from. Now, as I dig deeper towards trying to find the definitives in the categorization of social media activism, they also proclaim that a new term for this type of movement is also proclaimed as hashtag activism. Wow. Hashtag activism has been used to refer to the acts of showing support through a cause or a like, a share, or other engagement. So, the grandson of civic engagement, or the granddaughter or the grandchild of civic engagement is hashtag activism, and the parent of hashtag activism is social media activism, and the household or the family tree or origin of this family is civic engagement and participation. Y'all following me? So let's look now within hashtag activism, and let's see how we are starting to speed up into the world that we're in now. Civic engagement has always existed since humans have existed, and we had to learn how to survive throughout the nights, right? And throughout the days, and what to eat and what not to eat, and how to build and what not to build, and how to destroy and what not to destroy, right? We always been civically engaged for the fact of human survival, right? And now, because human survival requires us to see each other as human, we have always led in some form of social activism. And now that our generation has social media, Wi-Fi, the internet, the clouds, right? All of these platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, MySpace, and any other things that I have not listed that you all are frequently using, we are now in a space of social media activism that have given birth to hashtag activism, right? And there are cases where a hashtag has created a larger movement, notably in the case of Me Too, Never Again, Black Lives Matter, Say Her Name, Black Trans Lives Matter, Defund the Police, right? All of these have given life and have given birth through this new form and outlet called hashtag activism. And now that we're diving deep on hashtag activism, #, right? What will be the hashtag that will lead and catapult your movement, right? All of these have given life and have given birth through this new form and outlet called hashtag activism. And now that we're diving deep on hashtag activism, #, right? What will be the hashtag that will lead and catapult your movement, or what hashtag has inspired you to become a part of this community to push social progression and human rights and civil rights together? What hashtag connects with you? Which hashtag has not been created and needs to be birthed into existence that tells the stories and protects the narratives of a particular community for the betterment and the change of everyone? Again, what is your hashtag? What is your social media platform? Again, who are you? What is your story? What is your narrative? What are the commonalities between you and your community? Are you know by every time you get onto your platform that you have the right to be civically engaged and you have the accessibility to be civically engaged? And you're either going to follow behind someone that's leading into a space of positivity and purposeful change, or you're going to fall short and victim of just being another victim or observer of viral sensationalism that is distracting us from all of our purpose. But I want to lend you with this challenge. Be yourself, know your story, protect your story, protect your story, in your narrative. Know who your community is, find that commonality, welcome yourself into civic engagement, embrace social activism, understand the duality that comes with social media activism, and then brand yourself in your movement by finding or aligning yourself to a hashtag that either is in existence or create one. And then we'll start to understand how we can join the fight along other present leaders in today's world that is movement building through social media activism and using social media as a way of protest. So I ask you again, what change are you invoking? What type of leader you are? What platform will you be using? And if you're uncertain, don't worry. We'll start to look at other leaders that are doing this using various platforms. And I want you to follow them for inspiration so that you can then be a leader amongst other leaders and then train up other leaders. Because a leader is only as strong as the leaders that they are building. We're going to begin with Angela Davis, who is a college professor, but also one of our pivotal leaders of the Black Panther Party, who believes in the understanding of making prisons reform and actually eradicating the usage of private-owned prisons or public-owned prisons. Her most recent book talks about why our prisons are not obsolete and that they have no sense of rehabilitating or reforming someone that has been incarcerated either wrongfully or purposely. I want to give acknowledgments to Elder Reverend Al Sharpton of the National Action Network. Follow them on social media, along with my brother, who is one of his young proteges of our generation, is Shane Harris. Right? Follow Reverend Al Sharpton National Action Network on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, and follow my good brother, his protege, Shane Harris now. I want to also give acknowledgments to Ronna Burke, our sister who's assisted in our sister who's assisted in creating the Me Too movement, right? Of understanding the liberation of Black womanhood, of identity, and protecting the safehood of our Black women and our brown women. Give acknowledgments to Sister Tamika Mallory and her right-hand man, my soon the general, who are very well known and well recognized across the country for their fights for liberation, in which they are still fighting and hitting the ground. I want to acknowledge People of Change, which is one of the largest social media websites and virtual platforms that engage and raises awareness and consciousness and collaborative building around the progressions of positive movements and issues that need to be confronted or resolved as social issues. The People of Change by my brother Rashad Robinson, again on Twitter and Instagram of that sort. I also want to acknowledge our good brother D-Ray McKenzie, who is from Baltimore, who is a former educator as well, but the work that he does around the Black Lives Matter movements from the hot point in the epicenter of Ferguson down to Baltimore during the uprising. D-Ray McKenzie is one of our probably most well-known liberator fighters across the world that speaks on injustices and raise awareness around it. Remember what you want the world to be and fight for it, and know what you're willing not to sacrifice. And let's build a community so that you're not in it alone. And let's use social media for the betterment rather than a distraction of us all. Let's continue, you all, and let's continue to make our voices heard, because social media is one of our most effective ways of showing protest in today's world. The revolution will be televised. Let's stay blessed, y'all. Let's continue to be great. Again, I am Rashad Staten, self-proclaimed catalyst of change, youth advocate, youth activist, great man, purposeful man that just wants to continue to spark the mind of everyone else in the world so that we can have a better future and a better now. Let's continue on, you all. Peace. Enjoy your day, and let's stay purposeful. Let's stay civically connected. Let's all be leaders, and let's always build more leaders.
We are doing a mural project on women's suffrage, the 19th Amendment, and the 15th Amendment. We are painting what we're going to do in this mural out in Annapolis. So we're making like a mural about women's suffrage and how voting back then worked. The most fun part of the project for me is painting the pictures. I like painting because it like expresses myself. As the art director, I've basically been sketching out what the project is going to look like and how big it's going to be.
you all for coming back from that short intermission. Hopefully you've had a chance to freshen up, grab something to drink, use the restrooms. So how's everyone feeling so far? Hopefully you're enjoying the program and learning a lot. And now I want to know who's here with us. Although we can't physically see each other and be in the same room, you can still leave a comment in the comment section and let us know you're here. Wherever you're commenting from, make sure you use the hashtag BDMuseumYouthCon. We'll be searching that hashtag on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram and choosing random participants to receive really cool prizes that include gift cards, merchandise from our museum, and more. So please, as the program goes on, engage with us in the comment section. If you're not already doing so, follow us on Instagram at Banneker-Douglass Museum, subscribe to our YouTube pages, and like us on Facebook. This is the best way to keep up with the museum and find out about new exhibits and upcoming programs. With the recent passing of Congressman John Lewis, you may have heard about the Freedom Summer of 1964. As a young man and chairman of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, Congressman Lewis and his comrades, many of them young people, led the way in registering Mississippi natives to vote. In addition to their voter registration efforts, Freedom Summer attendees also were able to work with young people throughout the state on education efforts. And they named this initiative the Freedom Schools. Please enjoy this short video presentation about the Summer Freedom Schools of '64, and then an upbeat Harambe presentation from the CDF Pop Freedom Schools program.
One of the most wonderful things about 1964 Mississippi Summer were the Freedom Schools.
The state of Mississippi deliberately and systematically kept black people uneducated and ignorant, and then turned around and made education a requirement in order to participate in the political process. We were able to do the Freedom Schools in the summer of 1964 because we had almost 1,000 students coming to the state of Mississippi, thus the human resources to actually, conduct classes.
We would send out mass flyers and everything to the churches, telling people about the Freedom School, what the Freedom School was going to entail, the courses, the activities. We got the preachers involved, we got the kids involved.
Black people couldn't go to the library. It was for whites only. And so here they are, got their own library now. They would come excited to be exposed to the teaching.
They were reading books that had been written by blacks that they'd never heard of.
We set them up for the little children to come, and every day we'd have classrooms of adults, people 50, 60, 70 years of age. The adults came to the Freedom School to learn, just like the little children.
Being in Freedom School planted a seed in my mind that things are going to change, things are going to be different. And Freedom Summer helped to give us that courage, it helped to give us that hope, it helped to give us the reason to believe that it was going to be different.
I put the new 4Gs on the G. I trap into the bloody bottoms is underneath. Cause I might got it out the streets. I keep 100 racks inside my G. I remember hitting them all with the whole team. Now can't answer calls cause I'm balling. I was waking up getting racks in the morning. I was broke, now I'm rich, deep, salty. All all this designer on my body got me drip, drip. Ay, straight up out the objects, I'm a big crip. If I got up on a lean, I'm a sip, sip. I run the racks up with my queen like London and Nip. But I got rich on all these, I didn't forget back. I had to go through the struggle, I didn't forget that. I hopped inside of the Maybach and now I can sit back. Deep, know me now, cause I got them big racks. Cause I'm getting money.
This is America. Don't catch you slipping now. Don't catch you slipping now. Look what I'm whipping now. This is America. Don't catch you slipping now. Don't catch you slipping now. Look what I'm whipping now. This is America. Don't catch you slipping now. Look how I'm living now. Police be tripping now. Yeah, this is America. Guns in my area. I got the strap. I gotta carry him. Yeah, I'ma go into this. Yeah, this is gorilla. Yeah, I'ma go get the bag. Yeah, or I'ma get the pad. Yeah, I'm so cold like, yeah.
Welcome to our Pop CDF Freedom Schools, Harambe. Harambe is a Kiswahili word for let's pull together. Let me hear you say let's pull together.
Let's pull together.
Harambe is what we do every morning to get hyped for our literacy and athletics. Before we do anything in Freedom Schools, we say, good morning, Freedom Schools! G-O-O-D-M-O-N-N-I-N-G, good morning! Good morning! G-O-O-D-M-O-N-N-I-N-G, good morning! Good morning! Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning! Good morning! Buenos días, buenos días, buenos días, buenos días, buenos días! Buenos días! We can't start Harambe without knowing what day it is. It's definitely not Monday. It can't be Wednesday. It's not Thursday. It's Friday at Harambe. And Freedom Schools in the house. That's why it's Friday at Harambe. And Freedom Schools in the house. It's Friday at Harambe. And Freedom Schools in the house. It's Friday at Harambe. And Freedom Schools in the house.
At Pop CDF Freedom Schools, we let everyone know that their voices matter. So every day before program, we ask everyone, how are they feeling? We punch with the right, fantastic. Punch with the left, terrific. All day long, alternating, stomp, stomp, stomp. Whoa! So now we're going to ask everyone, including you, Freedom Schools, how we feeling? Fantastic, terrific, yeah, all day long. Whoa! Survey says, and so we're gonna do it again, and we're gonna turn it up a little bit. Remember, our voices matter. Freedom Schools, how we feeling? Fantastic, terrific, yeah, all day long. Whoa! Survey says, ding. The next part of Harambe, we call it Cheers and Chants. And this is a part where we really get to use our voice. There have been a lot of marches, there have been a lot of protests, even we're living through a pandemic. So through Cheers and Chants, this is where we get to use our voices and make a difference. So let me show you how we do it in Freedom Schools. So let me hear you say cheers and chants, cheers and chants, say cheers and chants, cheers and chants, say chip, chip, cheers and chants, chip, chip, cheers and chants, say cheers and chants, cheers and chants, say cheers and chants, cheers and chants, say chuckity, chuckity, cheers and chants, chuckity, chuckity, cheers and chants.
So this chant is called Run Me My Books. We can't be leaders in our community unless we know the power of books. They say history repeats itself. So let me teach you this chant. This is how the chant goes. Let me tell you a little something about me. I'm a pop scholar and I love to read. All I think about is reading books. When I step up in the school, I'm like, look, run me my books. Hey, run me my books. So now we're gonna do it all together.
make a difference in our community unless we're all together. So this chant is called Hanging With My Tribe. So this is a call and response chant. So when I say something, you gotta say something back. I will say, tell me what you feel like doing, y'all. And you'll say, I feel like hanging with my tribe. Hold up, wait a minute, let me put some freedom in it. Ooh, ha, I go to freedom school. Say what? Ooh, ha, I go to freedom school. You got it? So now we're gonna do it all together. You ready? Tell me what you feel like doing, y'all. I feel like hanging with my tribe. Hold up, wait a minute, let me put some freedom in it. Ooh, ha, I go to freedom school. Say what? Ooh, ha, I go to freedom school. Tell me what you feel like doing, y'all. I feel like hanging with my tribe. Hold up, wait a minute, let me put some freedom in it. Ooh, ha, I go to freedom school. Say what? Ooh, ha, I go to freedom school.
Every morning we do the motivational song called Something Inside So Strong. This reminds us of that there's something strong inside of every single person. For example, every woman needs strength to raise a family. Every man needs strength to handle a job. Each child needs strength to live out their dreams. So this song reminds us of to stay strong with everything we're going through.
The higher you build your barriers, the taller I become.
You don't get to participate in some Black culture.
If you recite our lyrics,
come to our shows,
or vibe to our music,
go viral with our dances,
get inspired by our leaders.
If you lose yourself in our movies,
cheer when we're on your team,
or gather with your family whenever we're on TV.
If you love our culture, then please love us.
If you respect the culture,
respect the people it comes from.
It's not enough to just say Black Lives Matter.
It's time you show it.
This mural of Breonna Taylor will be painted in historically Black neighborhood in Annapolis, Maryland. Artists and volunteers will paint the 7,000 square foot mural this weekend. One of the artists said the mural will be painted on a basketball court. The project is in collaboration with the Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture and the Banneker-Douglass Museum.
Through the power of public art, mural artists say that they hope to show this pivotal moment in our history in a peaceful and in an active way. The mural will be 7,000 square feet once it is totally finished.
Breonna Taylor was shot and killed by police more than 600 miles from Maryland in Louisville, Kentucky. But she will be memorialized here in Annapolis with a mural so big you'll be able to see it from outer space.
A team of artists and volunteers spent the day painting a mural of Breonna Taylor and Black Lives Matter across 2 basketball courts in Annapolis today. Around 30 volunteers and 10 teaching artists pulled out their paintbrushes and began drawing the 7,000 square foot artwork. Jeff Huntington, the founder of Future History Now, says he hopes students will remember this moment.
We want the youth of Annapolis to experience this pivotal moment in history in a creative, positive, and active way. So that when there are future leaders 20, 30, and 40 years from now, we want them to be able to look back on their personal experience and know that art is a positive way to uplift and beautify our communities.
Now, after 2 days of painting, the mural of Breonna Taylor and Black Lives Matter is finally finished. As you can see, it expands across 2 basketball courts in Annapolis. Several groups worked together to make it happen. The mural was designed in a way that a team of volunteers, regardless of their background, could work on it. Taylor was shot and killed by police in Louisville, Kentucky.
Hey everybody, my name is Chanel Compton and I am the Executive Director for the Banneker-Douglass Museum and the Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture. And I'm so excited to be your keynote for BDM's Youth Conference 2020. I'm an artist, an educator, a museum director, and ever since I was a child, I wanted to be an artist. And then when I became a teenager, I wanted to work in museums. And currently in my career, I get to do both. So today I'm going to be sharing with you some Black history, some art that I hope will empower and inspire you. So I hope you enjoy. 2020 has been a profound year. From the COVID-19 pandemic, living in quarantine, to the largest civil rights demonstration in U.S. history, this year will define our lives and our communities for generations to come. 2020 is also a historic year, as it is the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, which gave women the right to vote, and the 150th anniversary of the 15th Amendment, passed in 1870, that gave Black men the right to vote. But racial violence and voter suppression laws undermined the 15th and 19th Amendment. But it was through voting rights campaigns and legal suits from the turn of the 20th century to the mid-1960s where African American men and women made their voices heard and demanded the right to the vote. Indeed, the fight for Black voting rights continues in the courts today. Let us remember the work of the late and great John Lewis, who protested, risked his life, was arrested over 40 times to ensure the passing of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. The Voting Rights Act of 1965, signed into law by President Lyndon B. Johnson, aimed to overcome legal barriers that prevented African Americans from exercising their right to vote. John Lewis later served as state congressman and dedicated his career to protecting voter rights.
We started organizing. We were able to bring more than 250,000 people to march in Washington. And we all had to prepare a speech. I was very young, 23 years old, had all of my hair and a few pounds lighter.
I have the pleasure to present to this.
When April Randolph said, "I now present to you young John Lewis, the national chairman of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee."
Brother John Lewis.
I looked to my right. I saw hundreds and hundreds of young people who had been involved during the early days. Looked straight ahead. I saw this sea of humanity. Then I looked to the left. I saw young Black men and young white men up in the trees, trying to get a better view. And then I said to myself, well, this is it. And I looked straight ahead again. And something said to me, go for it. And I opened my mouth and I started speaking.
We march today for jobs and freedom. But we have nothing to be proud of. But hundreds and thousands of our brothers are not here. But they're receiving starvation wages or no wages at all. Those who have said be patient and wait, we must say that we cannot be patient. We do not want our freedom gradually, but we want to be free now. The time will come when we will not confine our marching to Washington. We will march through the South, through the streets of Jackson, through the streets of Danville, through the streets of Cambridge, through the streets of Birmingham. We must say, wake up, America, wake up, for we cannot stop, and we will not and cannot be patient.
Black protests have shaped not only civil rights for all Americans, but these movements have shaped Black art and cultural expression. Throughout U.S. history, artists have used their talents to give voice to our culture and social issues that impact society. such as police brutality, fair housing, racism, the prison industrial complex, the passing of our loved ones, honoring the great leaders who dedicated their lives to bettering our society, and the beauty of our heritage. What do you see? What do you think the artist is trying to tell us? How do you connect with this art? If you've been to any major city across America, you've seen public art that depict such powerful imagery. The definition of public art, simply put, public art is art in public spaces, such as neighborhoods, parks, and school buildings. Public art can include murals, sculpture, and memorials. Public art depicts our collective public values. It is made to inspire and encourage community empowerment. From colonialism, enslavement, and segregation, African Americans have fought to claim public space to showcase our presence, our contributions, and our history. When there is public art, such as Confederate monuments, still in public spaces, what does that say about who we are as a society? Why still do we honor Confederate leaders who fought to keep Black people enslaved? Where do we go from here? Today, as we are in the midst of the Black Lives Matter movement, a movement that has mobilized millions across the globe to put an end to police brutality and systemic racism, artists are creating public art, fashion, and music to give voice to this movement and its importance. So today, I encourage all of you that, like these artists, use your voice, tell your truth, volunteer, and give your time to help others. Love radically, but do not take care of the feelings of oppressors and those that exhibit racist, sexist, and homophobic behavior. We do not have time for that. And just know that when it comes to creativity, innovation, and social change, Black history lays the blueprint. Learn it, love it, and share it. And remember to vote in 2020 and encourage others to do the same. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Dr. David Fakunle. I serve as chair of the Maryland Lynching Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and I am also co-founder and CEO of Discover Me, Recover Me. I'd like to thank you all for joining me and for this opportunity to be a part of this moment, this very important moment. I know that the event said that I would talk about the history of youth protests, and I certainly will, but I decided to title this presentation, "And a Child Shall Lead Them: Youth's Invaluable Role in the Beautiful Struggle for Freedom." So among the many things that I do, I am a storyteller, and in most cases, I identify as a storyteller first. So what I want to do is start this presentation with a story that sets the tone for everything that I want to share. There was once a baby eagle that was found on the road by a farmer who was walking. And he saw the baby eagle next to two adult eagles. He presumed it was the baby eagle's parents, but they were dead. The farmer felt compassion for that baby eagle. He knew it would surely die if he didn't do something. So he picked it up and he took it back with him to his home. Now, the farmer didn't have any eagles on his farm, so he decided to put the baby eagle with the only birds that he did have, which were chickens. And fortunately, the chickens accepted the baby eagle and raised it as its own. So the baby eagle continued to grow and grow and grow and look more like an eagle every day. But because of the environment that it was in, it was acting like a chicken. So it would be around the chicken coop, walking, pecking at the ground for grain and corn. And soon the word got out across the village about this eagle that was acting like a chicken. And people would come to the farm to see it for themselves. And what did they see? They sure enough saw an eagle that was acting like a chicken. Now, the word got to a naturalist in the village as well, and he wasn't as amused. He was convinced that the eagle was only acting like a chicken because that's all the eagle knew. But if given the opportunity, the eagle would revert to its natural state. So the naturalist decided to go to the farm. He met with the farmer and he said, let me spend some time with this eagle. So he picked up the eagle, which he found in the chicken coop, acting like a chicken. He put it in his arm and he talked to the eagle. He said, "You are an eagle. You are meant to fly in the sky. You're not meant to be on the ground in a chicken coop, pecking at grain and corn. So what I want you to do is to spread your wings and fly." Now the eagle, he was looking at the naturalist. He looked at the farmer. He looked around the farm, and he eventually caught eyes on the chicken coop. It's home. And as soon as it did, it hopped off the naturalist's arm and started acting like a chicken again. Now, the farmer was watching this whole thing and he was amused. He thought this was a good laugh. But the naturalist said, "Let me come back tomorrow." So the naturalist came back the next day. This time, it took the eagle to the barn, the tallest building on the farmland. He looked at the eagle and he said, "You are an eagle. You are meant to be high in the sky. You are not meant to be on the ground. That is not your place. So what I want you to do is to spread your wings and fly." The eagle once again looked around. He looked at the naturalist. It looked at the farm. It looked at the farmer. And it looked at the chicken coop. And once it caught that chicken coop again, just like the last time, it hopped off the naturalist's arm and started acting like a chicken again. Now this time the farmer was annoyed. The joke was over for him. It's like, look, the eagle is fine. Sure, it's acting like a chicken, but it's not bothering anybody. It seems content. The other chickens embrace him. Why don't you just leave it be? But the naturalist said, "Give me one more day." So the next day, the naturalist shows back up. This time, it takes the eagle to the highest mountain in the region, far away from the farm. It puts the eagle in his arm and it says, this is your home. This is your environment. What I want you to do, what I need you to do is to spread your wings and fly." And again, the eagle looked around, but this time it did not see the farm. It did not see the farmer. It did not see the chicken coop. It did not see its fellow chickens. In fact, what it did see was a bird just like it, flying in the sky, flying majestically, flying confidently. And this time, that eagle jumped off the naturalist's arm over the mountain, and it was diving down back to the earth. But this time it fluttered its wings because it had never used them before. And after a while, it started to flap. Slowly but confidently, it started to rise back up in the air. And with a loud screech, the eagle flew away. I tell that story because we are in a moment where there are a lot of people, particularly Black people, people of color, who are realizing that they were eagles all along. They spent their entire lives being told that they were chickens, that they were something else, something different. In many cases, something less than. And because of the moment that we are in, they now realize that they are eagles. And a lot of those who are having that revelation are youth, are kids, who are now telling themselves, I am somebody, I can be great, and I will no longer live in a country that tells me otherwise or tries to exude otherwise. So the moment of protest, of revolt, of revolution against the system of racism is being led by young people such as yourselves. But this is nothing new. This is the history of protest. This is the history of revolt against the system of racism, against those systems of oppression that have mitigated and dehumanized Black people. So all of you who are protesting, all of you who are thinking of how you can contribute to this moment, you are carrying on a tradition in this country of how young Black people, young people of color have been the leaders, not just participants, but the leaders in this beautiful struggle for freedom and for liberation. This place is near and dear to my heart. This is the National Great Blacks in Wax Museum located in Baltimore, Maryland. It was founded by Dr. Joanne Martin and the late Dr. Elmer Martin in 1983 officially. And this was the place that was the repository and remains the repository for my Blackness and for understanding what it truly means to be Black and part of the African diaspora. So the Doctors Martin are my godparents. I grew up in this museum. It was a place that allowed me to see what I could be and see what I could do. Even relatively simple tasks like manning different stations in the museum, being a tour guide, explaining the different exhibits in the museum. The one thing I have to say is the National Great Blacks in Wax Museum was the first wax museum dedicated to Black history, the history of the African diaspora. It attracts hundreds of thousands of people all over the world to the 1600 block of East North Avenue, a place where many would tell you you shouldn't go, but yet it is the place where you find this incredible, diverse, and important history. So along with being able to do things as a kid, things that I may not otherwise have a chance to do, it was the place where I truly learned about myself. And the title of this presentation, "And a Child Shall Lead Them," came from the museum. That is where I first heard those words. And I learned that that is actually a passage in the Bible that comes from Isaiah 11:6. And the passage goes, "The wolf also shall dwell with the lamb. The leopard shall lie down with the young goat, the calf and the young lion and the fatling together, and a little child shall lead them." So if you think about that story in that passage, which is very short, but it says so much. You have leopards lying down with young goats, polar opposites. One you could consider a predator and one you could consider a prey, but they are together in harmony and peace, and it's a little child that is leading that cause. So it's so apropos for the moment that we're in. We want peace, we want justice, we want liberation, we want freedom, and it is the children, the youth, who are going to be the ones that lead that. And for me, where I recognize my power as a child, began with this place. So I want to take this time and present some of the history that I learned at the National Great Blacks in Wax Museum. Examples of Black youth who made contributions to the history of this country. And what I'm going to share is not just those who led protests, but I really want to give you an idea of impact. So impact is very important to me, and impact comes in so many different ways. Not everybody's going to be on the front lines. Not everybody's going to be in front of the microphone. Not everybody's going to be on TV, but everyone's contribution is important because it brings impact. So I want to start with this picture. Now, perhaps you have seen this picture before in the history books or online or whatever the case may be. This is the famous picture of General George Washington, who became the first president of the United States, crossing the Delaware River with the Continental Army as they were combating the British in the American Revolution. What you may notice if you look at General Washington's knee, there is a Black man in that boat. That Black man was named Tom Graves. Tom Graves had a son named Jocko. Both Tom Graves and Jocko Graves were enslaved and owned by General George Washington. So yes, George Washington was a slave owner. If you haven't known that, now you do. So Tom Graves was a part of this effort to fight for the American Revolution. Jocko Graves, his son, was also a part of that as well. Jocko Graves was asked by General George Washington to hold his horses as they were crossing the Delaware River. And so he did. When they returned, they found Jocko Graves frozen to death. This was a little kid, no more than 9 or 10 years old, found frozen to death with the reins of the horses still in his hands. So he never abdicated his responsibility. George Washington was so moved by Jocko's responsibility and Jocko's commitment to this task that was asked of him that he commissioned a statue in his honor. So you see these various manifestations of that memorial to Jocko Graves. So starting with the Faithful Groomsman in 1776, a caricature version in 1860, and then the Lawn Jockey in 1871. So if you have gone to places, typically in rural areas or down south, you will see this statue that typically holds a lantern. Well, it is based on Jocko Graves and the memorial by General Washington to his dedication to the American Revolution. So sure, all he did was hold General Washington's horses, but he contributed to this important aspect of American history, and General Washington wanted to honor that task. So Jocko Graves, we may not consider him a leader. We may not consider him someone who we would put at the forefront of the struggle for freedom. But in this sense, he did his part, and he was honored as such. Now, we see that that memorial has been characterized, made a caricature and bastardized in a lot of ways. So it's important to know the history of this figure, to know that this represented a young Black child who did his part to contribute to the fight for freedom, for American freedom in this case, despite the fact that he in fact was enslaved. So I'm guessing we all know who this guy is, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I decided to include him, not just because he's a familiar face for, I'll say, all of us, but to really remind you all that he was young, very young, when he did the things that made him such a mythical figure in our consciousness today. I included this picture in particular because what I have noticed, and many have noticed in the 50 plus years since his assassination, and yes, assassination, not death, but assassination, was that he as a figure and so much of his message has become whitewashed. And what I mean by that is his words, his actions are used in a way to quell, to really kind of silence the disruption that happens when we have protests, when we have uprisings against racism. I want to remind you that the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was considered by many in white America during the 50s and 60s the most dangerous man in the country. There is a reason that he was a part of COINTELPRO, which was created by J. Edgar Hoover of the FBI, where they would spy on him, his personal life, all the dealings and work that he was doing, because they considered him that dangerous. So anyone that invokes his name to say, oh, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. wouldn't approve of what people are doing now when they're protesting and uprising, he absolutely would. I want to bring a quote, if I may, from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. that most people don't hear. So we are typically familiar with the I Have a Dream speech, various parts of that very famous speech. And a lot of us think that's all there was to him, that it was all about harmony and peace and love. And yes, it was. He was about nonviolent protest, but he was about disruption. And he disrupted so many of the systems that perpetuated Jim Crow segregation in the South. So we're talking about Alabama, we're talking about Mississippi, we're talking about Georgia. But it was about disruption. It was about bringing discomfort to the status quo, because if there was no discomfort, nothing would change. So I don't want us to forget the revolutionary that Martin Luther King Jr. was. And yes, he was incarcerated many times for the work that he did. So it was clear that he was considered a threat. And we should always be remembered that he was a threat to the status quo that perpetuated white power. So here's the quote that I want to share, actually one of two. So I'll start with this one. If the Negro is to be free, he must move down into the inner resources of his own soul and sign with a pen and ink of self-asserted manhood and womanhood, so I'm paraphrasing, his own and her own Emancipation Proclamation. Don't let anybody take your manhood, your womanhood. Be proud of our heritage. We don't have anything to be ashamed of. Somebody told a lie one day. They couched it in language. They made everything black, ugly, and evil. Look in your dictionaries and see the synonyms for the word black. It's always something degrading and low and sinister. Look at the word white. It's always something pure, high, and clean. Well, I want to get the language right tonight. I want to get the language so right that everyone here will cry out, yes, I'm black. I'm proud of it. I'm black and I'm beautiful. So this is a reminder that for as much as Martin Luther King Jr. was about the harmony of all man and all womanhood, he was proud to be black. He appreciated his heritage. He was not ashamed of it. These are some of the quotes that we don't necessarily hear when we think about Dr. King. And it's okay to be both. It's okay to strive for harmony and peace and all of those beautiful virtues of humanity among all of us, no matter what our background is, no matter what our ancestry is. But be proud of who you are. Be proud of being black. Be proud of what you represent. Be proud of the history that has brought you to this moment. So the second quote from Dr. King that I want to share is this one. Again, we have deluded ourselves into believing the myth that capitalism grew and prospered out of the Protestant ethic of hard work and sacrifice. The fact is that capitalism was built on the exploitation and suffering of Black slaves and continues to thrive on the exploitation of the poor, both Black and white, both here and abroad. And that is from The Three Evils of Society in 1967, so a year before he was assassinated. So Dr. King was not just about the rights of Black people, he was about the rights of the poor. And he recognized that poverty was not just a Black issue. It was a white issue. It was a Native American issue. It was a Latino issue. So he really elevated the message of how not just Blacks were being affected by racism, but how the poor were being affected by capitalism. And that included white people as well. That was a very dangerous message in the 50s and 60s, and it's still a very dangerous message now because of the ramifications of helping poor whites realize how they are being affected in this current system. And that leads me to this gentleman, Fred Hampton. I'm going to read his quote first before I talk a little bit about Fred Hampton. I'm not going to die on no airplane. I'm not going to die slipping on no ice. I'm not going to die for the people. I'm going to die for the people because I'm going to live for the people. I'm going to live for the people because I love the people. Fred Hampton was a leader in the Chicago branch of the Black Panthers, and the Black Panthers was an organization that was also started by youth. I highly recommend anyone to check out Black Panthers Vanguard of the Revolution. It premiered a few years ago on PBS. I'm sure you can find it somewhere online. It's about 2 hours. It's great. It's such an encompassing history of the Black Panthers, its formation, its rise, unfortunately, its fall. So it really tells the whole story. And many of the prominent people within the Black Panthers, so like Huey Newton, what's my brother's name? I'm forgetting names right now. But one of them was Fred Hampton, and Fred Hampton was out of Chicago. Fred Hampton was only 21 years old when he was assassinated by Chicago police. So this was another young Black man who caught the eye of the status quo, the establishment, because of how dangerous he was with his message. And his message was not just about Black power, but it was about Latino power. It was about Native American power. It was also about poor white power. And what I mean by that was he recognized, just like Dr. King did, that Black people were suffering in the current system. Latinos were suffering in the current system. Native Americans were suffering in the current system, and poor white people were suffering in the current system. And he was able to create coalitions among those various groups. So all those groups had their own representation, their own organizations, and he was able to organize them to show them that if we work together, we can topple the system that keeps us apart and that keeps us marginalized within the United States. And that is what got him killed, assassinated. And I do mean assassinated at 21 years old. So I mentioned these heroes because we make them mythical because we're so separated from the time in which they lived. And in some cases, we think of them as so much older than they were. No, they were young. They were young and came up with these ideas and thought of these opportunities to make sizable change, significant change in the places where they lived. So that is well within your capabilities to do the same. It is not easy. As you can see, the last two gentlemen that I mentioned, Dr. King and Fred Hampton, were both assassinated. So it is a choice that you have to make. It is potentially a dangerous choice that you have to make. But again, like Fred Hampton, despite the 21 years that he had on this earth, he lived for the people because he loved the people. And in this moment where we are protesting the unnecessary killings of people, that is what we choose to do. That is what I know many of you are choosing to do, is live for the people because you love the people, because you love yourselves, because you want to have a life of your own determination. And there is nothing that should stop you from doing that. So you protest, so you fight, so you organize, so you make those relationships among people who are feeling the same way. And in this particular moment in 2020, there are a lot of people who feel the same way, and they may not all look like you, and that's good. The notions of oppression are not exclusive to Black people. The notion of oppression is felt by so many. Use that as the basis of the change, the significant change that you want to make. So all of that history that I have learned, that knowledge itself has significantly affected me because of the National Great Blacks in Wax Museum and so many others, like the late, great Mama Mary Carter Smith, who taught me African storytelling, because of the Sankofa Dance Theater located in Baltimore that taught me African drumming. I was able to combine all of those talents, cultural expressions, just understanding of who I was and am as a Black man, into what I do today. So these are just a couple of pictures to give you an idea of who I am, Dr. David Fakunle. So I am a brother, I am a son, two parents who stressed education, and because of their commitment to that, I am a PhD, and my sister Mary is a medical doctor. I am also, as I mentioned before, an African drummer with the opportunity to perform all over the country and around the world, sharing my cultural expression as an African. And as a storyteller, same thing, to keep the culture, to keep the tradition that is thousands of years old into the arts, but also science as well. So as a public health researcher, I use storytelling. I use storytelling to remind us of the common humanity that we all share, and to remind us what's most important, and to not let anything stop us from doing that. So these are all things within our capability. And I'm just a kid from East Baltimore. If you know anything about Baltimore, it has its challenges, and East Baltimore is no exception. So it was because of the opportunities, it was because of those elders, family, extended family, my cultural family, that planted all these seeds within me. Whether or not they knew how it would turn out, they did it because of their compassion. Just like the farmer, he meant well. And because of his compassion, he saved that baby eagle's life. Because of the naturalist, that baby eagle was able to become who it was truly meant to be. And I hope that I am a living example of what can be. If we use our resources, if we use our opportunities, if we think compassionately, if we think with empathy about our youth and what they can be. I was a child once. I'm still relatively young. I'm only 33 years old. So I pray I have a lot of life ahead of me. You can do extraordinary things, but we are ordinary people who are just given extraordinary opportunities. And when it is done with compassion, with love, with determination, you can do incredible things. And that is what I want you all to know. All of these things that you see here are well within your capability, and I am here to help as best I can. So one of the ways that I've been able to combine a number of these opportunities and manifestations of what was provided me has been the Maryland Lynching Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So this commission was created in 2019 through House Bill 307. It was signed, it was passed through the Maryland General Assembly unanimously on both sides, signed by Governor Larry Hogan. And now this commission is charged with chronicling and bringing justice to the 40 plus confirmed lynchings in the state of Maryland between 1854 and 1933. We also have the leeway to investigate lynchings that may have not been recorded, that may have gone unknown. But ultimately, our goal is to not just chronicle the history, but again, to bring justice. So how do we bring justice? How do we honor the victims of these heinous crimes, this dark aspect of Maryland's history, but one that must be known? Well, this is our current task. This is what we are looking to do as a commission. There are currently 18 of us, but we also work with local coalitions. We work with historians. We work with historical institutions, academic institutions, to really be able to tell the whole story. And I, as the chair, and my co-chair, Charles Chavis Jr., we are both the youngest on the commission. So again, young people are leading the way. We know how important the story is, not just the story of the victims, but the story of the perpetrators and the stories of the spectators as well. Now, we know those people are no longer with us, but their descendants are. There are people within the towns where these lynchings occurred that do know the stories, much more than perhaps has been chronicled. So that is what we aim to do. We want to tell the whole truth. And the truth starts with the fact that these lynchings were unjustified in every way. They were ways to intimidate Black communities. They were ways of preserving white power. So that is a given. But we want to know the ramifications, not just on the families of the victims, but the families of the perpetrators, the families of the spectators, the families that resided within the towns and the cities where these lynchings occurred. So as a storyteller, I believe in the totality of the story. And as chair of the commission, that is what I want to bring. But most importantly, I do want to bring justice. And that does mean telling the whole story, not just in a report, but in the education of our Maryland youth. So no matter what school you go to, you should know the history of lynching. You should know how racial terror lynchings were committed to, again, preserve the status quo, to preserve the marginalization of Black people, of people of color, and what we as a commission are doing to undo that damage as best we can. So I have an exercise for all of y'all. Like I said, I am a storyteller. So I cannot do this presentation without providing some better understanding of storytelling. So every story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It contains characters. There are the settings, the places within the story. There are the themes. How are people feeling? What are people thinking? That's all within your ability as the storyteller. And then ultimately there's the message. And I call that the point. So no matter how long your story is, no matter how short your story is, whether you're telling it orally, whether you're presenting it visually, whether it is a video, whether it is performance art, what is the point? What is the core message that you want people to know after they hear your story? So this is an exercise that I want y'all to do. I'm going to tell a part of this story, the 7 Orisha teachings, and I want you all to finish the story. So the god Olodumare was looking down on earth. He was looking at the people, and Olodumare was not pleased with what he saw. So he confided with the Orishas, the spirits, and he said, we have to start this over. We have to teach the people better. We need to find somebody who can be that vessel to present these teachings from the Orishas. So one of the Orishas went down to earth and looked everywhere for the right person to be that vessel to bring these teachings to the people. And the Orisha went 6 times and didn't find anybody that they deemed worthy. But on the 7th try, they did. They found a baby so young that it was still nursing with his mother. And the Orisha went back to Olodumare and said, this child, this baby is the one. This baby can bring the teachings of the Orishas to the people. So that Orisha went back to earth and took that baby up to the sky with Olodumare, with the Orishas, and it learned from them. And by the time the teaching was done and that baby was brought back to earth, that baby was no longer a baby. It was an old man. It was an elder. And the elder went off to bring the teachings of the Orishas to the earth, to the people. So my question to you all is, in the way that I want you all to finish the story, what were those 7 teachings? What were the 7 teachings from the Orishas, from Olodumare, that baby, now an elder, was taught and charged with teaching the people back on earth? So I'm gonna give you all a few seconds to think about that. So this particular story actually is a Chippewa story. So it is an indigenous story that I gave a Yoruba twist. I am Yoruba. My family's from Nigeria. So I wanted to honor my ancestry, but show the versatility of a story. So you can take a story from any tradition. It can be the African tradition, the indigenous tradition, the European tradition, the Asian tradition, and you can make it your own. And this was just an example of one way that I did that. So in thinking about the 7 teachings that was given to this baby, now elder, I'm going to give you one just as a hint. So one of those teachings was wisdom. To cherish knowledge is to know wisdom. Wisdom is given by the Creator, to be used for the good of the people. So that was one of the 7 teachings given by the Orisha, or in the traditional Chippewa version, the 7 grandfathers. So I'm curious what your remaining 6 teachings will be, but my guess is that no matter who you are, they will be very similar. And this exercise and this story in particular is a reminder of, again, the commonality that we all share. One thing that I say is that in the end of the day, when we think about the totality of our lives, no matter who we are, where we came from, our background, the color of our skin, we all want to be loved. We all want to be appreciated. We all want to be respected. We want to be understood, and we want to be acknowledged. Those are common across humanity. And so I ask us all, why should anything stop us from that? So when I think about the work that I do, when I think about the work that we as youth, as young people do in the struggle, the beautiful struggle for freedom, for liberation, this is why I do it in particular. I do it for those who are coming after me. So this is my son, Cruz Matisse. He was 3 in this picture. This was my wedding. He's 6 now. So all the work that I do in my life is for him. All the work that I do is for the kids that he plays with, his classmates. It is for the opportunity for them to live a life of their own determination. I have told many people that my son does not need to do what I do. He does not need to have a PhD. He does not need to be in this work the way that I am. I am doing this so that if it's up to him, he can just be happy. He can be a doctor. He can be an engineer. He can be a trashman for all I care. I just want him to be happy. The work that I do, again, not just for him, but for all of you, is because I want you all to be happy. I don't care what you do, but if you can tell me that you are happy with the life that you have, then I have done my work. The struggle for change is really the struggle for happiness, so that people can enjoy this time that we have, which is limited. We are just a speck in the grand story of humanity, of civilization. Why not enjoy the time that we have? It should not be wasted having to convince people that we deserve that. But such is our fight. Such is our challenge. And we will do that so that whether in our lifetime or when we are gone, in the lifetime of our children or our grandchildren, we can feel in our spirit, in our essence, that they are living lives of happiness because they choose to be happy. They choose to do whatever they want to be happy. So that is why I fight. That is why I speak. That is why I tell my story. That is why I serve. And I'm grateful to all of you out there that do the same, not just in the beautiful struggle for freedom, but the pursuit of happiness, true happiness. So I thank you all for your time, for your energy, for your attention. I encourage you to stay in touch with me. So you can reach out to me via this email address, via my website, discovermerecoverme.com. And please stay in touch with the Maryland Lynching Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Despite the fact that we are virtual, we are remote, we are continuing to do the work. We are having our meetings. We are starting the chronicling of stories. So the work will get done no matter what the obstacles are in front of us. It is too important. It is too necessary to you all. It is too necessary to the history that we are making today, not for us to put every ounce of effort we can into the work. So we will work, we will fight, we will be a part of this beautiful struggle for change. So again, I thank you. I honor you. And most importantly, tell your stories, tell your unapologetic truth, be the eagles that I know you all are, and don't let anyone ever tell you otherwise. Peace.
Hello, my name is Nicole Johnson, and I am the founder of Baltimore Read Aloud, an online bookstore dedicated to promoting diverse books. This presentation introduces books about social justice written for young children, teens, and adults. You're never too young to learn about social justice and the role you can play in addressing racism, white supremacy, and police violence. I want to begin this presentation with a series of titles written for children ages 0 to 8.
Bombs over Baghdad, trying to get something we never had. Let's start with a good dad. So real, but it's so sad. And while we burning this incense, we gon' pray for the innocent. Cause right now it don't make sense. Right now it don't make sense. Let's talk about Chi-Town. Let's talk about Gaza. Let's talk about Israel. Right now with Israel. Let's talk Nigeria in a mass hysteria. Yeah, our souls are brought together so that we could love each other, brother. We are here.
This next series of books are for children ages 8 to 12. These books honor the voice of young people and encourage everyone to say something and do something when faced with injustice.
Say the nation with no support for education. Cause right now it don't make sense. Right now it don't make sense. Let's talk about our part. My heart touch your heart. Let's talk about living. Had enough of dying, not what we all about. Let's do more giving, do more forgiving. Yeah, our souls are brought together.
Every day we hear reports of activists taking to the streets to protest police violence. A new generation is continuing the struggle started by our ancestors. This next selection of books is for youth and young adults ages 13 and up. They reveal the history, politics, and impact of today's activism. To learn more about these books and other diverse titles, please visit our online shop or follow us on Instagram.